Welcome to the Think Fitness Life podcast, your one-stop shop for exploring the connections between fitness, health, and overall well-being. Join us as we dive deep into all aspects of a balanced and vibrant life, from pushing your limits in the gym to finding peace of mind outside of it. Whether you're a seasoned athlete or just starting your journey, you are in the right place to discover the knowledge and insight to perfect your fitness life.
All right, we are live once again with the Think Fitness Life podcast, and today I am with author, personal trainer, and fellow podcast host himself out of Ireland. I'm with Brian Keane, who went from a school teacher to one of Ireland's top trainers. He wrote 2 books that made it to the Amazon bestseller list and the national bestseller list, called The Fitness Mindset, and then the second book was called Rewire Your Mindset. He's here with us today to talk about the insights he's learned over his years of coaching. Welcome, Brian.
Matt, thank you so much for having me on. Really looking forward to chatting.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm really glad to dive into some of the stuff that you've made here and kind of the impact you've created and the following you've created. So let's dive right in. Can you give the audience a little short synopsis on, let's start with the Fitness Mindset. That was the first one you wrote, right?
Yeah, the Fitness Mindset. So I wrote the Fitness Mindset and released it in 2017. And over the last few years, I've actually written 4 books total, for different reasons, for different audiences, for different avatars. But the Fitness Mindset was my first one. And it's what I call my glass ceiling book. It was the one that broke me through a glass ceiling when it came to how I was positioned within the fitness industry. And in 2015, 2016, I was in this kind of weird transition. I was a competitive bodybuilder and I was a professional fitness model in 2013, 2014, 2015 when I came out of the world of school teaching, and it was my introductory point into one-to-one personal training. And because I started to grow a social media following at the time, and primarily on Instagram, and it was Snapchat, which was big back then, I was getting labeled as this fitness influencer. And I was trying to build up this fitness business that was helping people lose weight, lose body fat, build muscle, tone up, etc. And I needed a way to get out of that influencer bracket. And I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. Like, the root word for authority is author. If I write a book, this will help propel me to potentially another level. And it did way better than I ever dreamed possible. The Fitness Mindset, when it came out, was 16 weeks on the Amazon bestseller list. It has got me and opened more doors to speaking engagements, to traveling around the world, to do talks on the book, working with corporate, pre-qualifying leads for people coming into my online program. I obviously get the royalty element of it. And I was so grateful for the feedback. Now, as I said, if nobody read the book, but my mom and my dad and my sister, and it positioned me out of the influencer category, it would have been worth it.
You were stoked regardless.
100%. I was really happy because so many people have a book in them. I know we spoke about this just before we went on air. A lot of people have that book in them, and it's hard to sit down and prioritize doing it. And when I released it and I saw the overwhelming positive feedback, because it was just making fitness less complicated. It was, again, this has gone another extreme now in 2024, where people are overcomplicating nutrition, overcomplicating training, and getting really confused about the whole thing, because it's the nature of the beast with social media. If you need to get attention, you need to say something that's going to split people, or something that's potentially controversial, or something that you might not necessarily believe in, but it gets a lot of virality and attraction and attention. And that confuses people who don't have a good grounding in nutrition or a good grounding in fitness. And that book was the early stage of cutting through that noise. It still does that today. I think that's why it still sells so many copies and helps so many people. But that was the initial stage for why I wrote that. It's a short book. I wrote a fitness book for people who don't read books. It's short. You could finish it in a day. It's a 3.5-hour audiobook. And it goes through just basics of what you need to know with nutrition, with training, with stress, with sleep, with mindset. And I think that's why it was so impactful, and still one that I get a lot of feedback on today, because it's cutting through a very complicated fitness world.
I love the nobility of your endeavor. You know, we all are trying to scratch the surface, so to speak, cut a little piece of the pie out for ourselves, and it's so easy to get involved in the noise and be part of it and be controversial. And all it does is add more to the problem, add more to the noise and the confusion for the individual. So I can appreciate, and I'm sure a lot of your followers appreciate too, for you to really simplify the process and make it digestible and make it a reality that people can do this stuff on their own, and they don't need to be sold by mass media. So then the fitness mindset's more of like a general blueprint touching on multiple areas, kind of like a little about a lot, I guess you could say.
Yeah, that's
And
exactly how I'd say it.
How did you transition into Rewire Your Mindset, and what is that one more about?
So Rewire Your Mindset's a lot more of a lifestyle-based book, and it was partly down to a combination of me struggling with a lot of things in the early days. So building up a business, I went from working as a school teacher to setting up my own one-to-one personal training business. I went broke twice. This is the third attempt. Thankfully, the third attempt went quite well. The first
third time's the charm.
Yeah, exactly. The first two were dreadful. A lot of it was down to not working with a coach or a mentor, not reading enough books, and kind of cutting my own learning curve. But your message becomes your message. And when I was going from the fitness mindset and got all the doors that started to open off the back of that book, I had left the world of professional bodybuilding, of professional fitness model, and I was a competitive bodybuilder. And my daughter was born in 2015. So I was in this kind of weird transition in terms of my life, where I was getting out. I had historically played sport all my life. Gaelic football is like a combination between American football, basketball, and I had played that all my life. Went into bodybuilding, went into professional fitness modeling, got a one-to-one personal training business off the ground, released that first book, and then started to ask, okay, well, what's next? And why do I still feel a little bit unfulfilled here? Because I was making more money in a month than I was in a year as a teacher. I was doing quite successful in terms of the followers and the impact I was having. And something felt out of balance in my life. And Rewire Your Mindset was basically me dissecting my own life and falling out of balance. So I broke that book. It's into kind of 4 quadrants: health, wealth, love, and fulfillment, and trying to get that life balance when you feel like you've fallen out of equilibrium, where you've skewed too far in one direction. And a lot of the issues that I had when it came to entrepreneurship, when it came to fitness goals, when it came to relationship goals, where a lot of them were self-created, fear and self-sabotage, and not having the resilience and not having the good habits to be able to impact the changes I needed to make on a daily basis to get the life that I wanted. So that book was it's longer, it's bigger. It's the book out of all 4 that I've written that I get the most messages about, because it's the book that potentially can change your life if you're in a position where you need to read it. Now, I'm also a believer, not everyone should read my books. Like some people should read them. It'll find them exactly where they're at, and it could really help them in a positive way. Other people shouldn't. That's why book recommendations are so difficult. It depends on what stage of your life you're at.
1000%.
But if you're someone, if you're in the position where you have a vague idea on the life that you want, but you're getting in your own way. The quote I use regularly through that book is your own biggest enemy living between your 2 ears. That you're getting in your own way.
Laird Hamilton, right?
100%. Yeah. It's a Laird quote. And that is basically what that book was geared towards. So anyone that's struggling with relationships, or struggling with entrepreneurship, or struggling with their fitness or their health or their wellness or their fulfillment levels, that book kind of gives a blueprint to how to think so that you're able to basically access these things. It's not quite the secret level, because I'm a believer that the law of attraction without action is a distraction, but a practical.
That was powerful. You got to say that again and slow it down.
So the law of attraction without action is a distraction. And I'm a big believer in that. I think that you need to be able to visualize what you want, but you also have to be able to take action and do things and have practical steps that you can take in order to live and get that life that you want. And that's basically what that book is. Think of The Secret with practicality involved, mixed in.
Yeah, it's almost like your first book is kind of like the blueprint to get going and build that fitness lifestyle routine, and the Rewire Your Mindset's supposed to be like your manifesto as you go along the way. And because you're going to get caught in bad patterns, we all do. And you said it earlier, like you were your own worst enemy. And I think everyone listening to this episode understands that we all end up becoming our worst enemy at some point. That's the kind of the Rubik's Cube we have to solve so that we get out of our own way and can live our best life. So, you started talking a little bit about your personal life for Rewire Your Mindset, and how that was kind of the motivation to establishing those quadrants and that equilibrium and helping bring that balance back to one's life. What was the motivation or the calling that you felt when you sat down to draft your first book, The Fitness Mindset?
It's interesting because it's a great question. And I need to piggyback the two books together in order to answer it effectively.
Yeah.
Sitting down and writing the first book flowed out of me. And I won't lie, because I had been working in the fitness industry for quite a while. I was into it myself, and most of the time for the first book came in the editing. It was literally killing my darlings, is a quote from Stephen King in his book on writing, that you go back and take out everything that's not needed in the book. Like, it's like
Right.
if you picture Michelangelo and the statue of David, he's like, David was always underneath. I just had to chip away at the brick until I got it.
Yeah.
So that's how I was with the fitness mindset. I had written so much, it ended up finishing at 30 or 35,000 words, and there was about 80 or 90 to begin with, and I just chopped away mercilessly at everything that didn't need to be in it.
Over half the book. Yeah,
and that's what it ended up being, and hence why it became a book that people who don't read books read, because you can finish it.
Yeah.
The Rewire Your Mindset was very different, and it came from a bit of a loving / morbid place. It was when my daughter was about 2 or 3, and I remember thinking, if anything ever happened to me, she doesn't have a blueprint on how to live life.
Wow, that's powerful.
So every time I sat down, Matt, I thought, okay, if I die tomorrow, what's the message I want to leave behind for her if she needs a blueprint for me? So that was the position. I literally wrote from that place. They always say write to one person when you're writing a book. And I wrote to that place. The first book, I wrote to my avatar, my perfect client. My second book, I wrote to my daughter if I wasn't here. And that was the place I was in terms of the motivation and the positioning and framing that I put myself in terms of priming before any writing session.
And then you probably knew ultimately that you were going to be talking about some very profound things or deep topics, because it's all the stuff you're trying to leave her with as a legacy, to get her through the life when you're gone. So that's very powerful that was like your set intention for writing that second book.
Mm-hmm.
So do you have a personal fitness transformation story that we can dive into that you'd like to share?
I have a very interesting story when it comes to fitness, because I have a very non-linear route. I wasn't overweight, and I don't have the traditional overweight coach to now fitness coach helping people that are overweight. I'm very empathetic towards a lot of overweight individuals that I work with, but for different reasons. Yeah. My background was as an athlete, so I always had a bit of a fitness background, and I was quite sporty. And then I went into bodybuilding in 2014 and did really well in that world. As I mentioned.
Now, is this while you were a teacher, or is this after?
After. So when I transitioned out as a teacher, and I went into bodybuilding and fitness modeling. Now, I did really well in the world of fitness model. I did my second show. I turned pro at that show, which means you can compete for money. Yeah. So I was able to compete for money after that. And the reason I went into that show initially was because I was trying to get a one-to-one personal training business off the ground in a gym in my local. I'd moved back from London, where I was working as a teacher, an elementary school teacher. I moved back to Galway in the west of Ireland, where there's really good Guinness in the west of Ireland. I moved back there, and just for anyone listening, we were talking about Guinness before we went on air, just to give a little bit of background context to that.
And not to add any controversy, but I also do like Murphy's, and I know that's out of Cork, and there's a little bit of a.
We'll take both. I like both, so I can't skew. It's just a pick your poison kind of job
here. We're inclusive.
Exactly. It's an inclusive podcast all the way around from beer and fitness. But I moved back to Ireland in 2014, and I had no podcast, no books, no social media. Nobody knew who I was. But I had been working for 2 years in London as a teacher during the day and the personal trainer at nighttime. So I was pretty good at my craft at that point, because everyone's terrible in the beginning. It's the old adage that, every master was once a disaster. I was terrible starting off, because everybody is. Yeah. But by the time I had moved back in 2014, I was pretty good at my craft. And I found that I was getting good results with my clients. I ended up getting a lot of referrals, but it still wasn't growing as quickly as I wanted. And I thought, okay, this fitness modeling thing, men's physique at the time, was getting quite big. I said, all right, my perfect customer is guys looking to get in shape. That was my primary avatar at that time. It's changed since. I work more now with older men, older women, etc. But at the time, that was my avatar. And I said, okay, if I go in and do these fitness model shows and bodybuilding shows, that's different to what every other personal trainer in this locale is doing. Nobody else was doing that at the time. So I said, I'll do this and it'll separate me. And it did. I ended up getting loads of clients off the back of those shows because I did well in them. And I stayed in that world, competed, went a bit too extreme. I had really bad body dysmorphia, really disordered eating patterns. I went the complete other way. although I quote unquote looked good in terms of fitness model, bodybuilding, I had a terrible self-image that I had to work on over the years. And when I left that world after my daughter was born, because I was preparing for the Worlds in Vegas in 2015, and my daughter was born in May 2015. And I remember thinking after she was born, I can't keep doing this. I was like, I'm walking around like a calorie depleted zombie. I can't even think. I'm actually going to be a rubbish dad if I keep living this lifestyle. So I did the show in Vegas. I came 8th, which again, top 10 in the world. I was really happy with my performance. And then that was it. I bowed out. I stepped out. I was like, I'm done. I'm not going out in this world anymore. And I did that for a couple of years, focused on business, writing the book. And then I transitioned into ultra marathons. And that was a bit of effectively a 180. If like, I'm not built to run ultra marathons, I'm built for sport. I'm 5'8". I'm built like a little hobbit, short, stocky, but I signed up to do in 2018, it's called Marathon des Sables. It's 6 back-to-back marathons through the Sahara Desert. And I did that in 2018. It was my first ever ultra. Hardest thing I'd ever done in my life up until that point.
That's
and
wild.
Then I kept on that path. Then after that, Matt, I did the Arctic. I ran 230 kilometers through the Arctic in 2019. I did my first 100-mile ultra marathon, 26 hours straight through in 2020. And then I kind of transitioned out now and I do a few other things. So my fitness journey was from one end of an extreme, from sport to bodybuilding to ultra marathons to kind of everything in between. Like I love fitness. I love training like CrossFit and doing S&C workouts and bodybuilding workouts. I just love training and working out. It's part of my life. I'll do it till the day I die. But my fitness journey has skewed all the way across from things I'm good at and naturally good at to things I'm not. But I've been lucky and picked up some pretty cool stories along the way. So that is a lot of my content with the podcast, with books, etc. I weave in some of my stories and anchor them to how they're applicable to other people in their everyday lives. But it's been a bit of a wild ride over the last decade or so.
Yeah, very, very diverse, but I'm sure it gives you a lot of fodder for coaching points and mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shifting your mindset and having mental fortitude to overcome the pain of running 100 miles or running in the Arctic or running in the Sahara. So talk to me a little bit about the prep that you had to do for getting into these races. I mean, you've ran 100 miles in one go without stopping, correct?
Yeah. 26 and a half hours it took me. Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild. So talk to me about talk to me a little bit about the mindset that you created to get to that point, and then talk to me about race day, how you orchestrated yourself with salt pills and hydration.
Every race is very different. The mindset, there's so much crossover. And what I love about fitness is it's such an incredible metaphor for life, because it doesn't matter how big the goal is that you set for yourself. You have to break it down into smaller component parts. It's like the old African proverb, how do you eat an elephant? You eat it bite by bite. And that's what fitness is like. That's what a 100-miler is like. And when I did the 100-miler, it's a good example because it's the one that you can picture in your head. I always tell people I didn't run 100 miles. I ran 1 mile 100 times. And that's the same thing, but that's how I approach life. That's how I approach a book. I don't approach, a book in terms of I need to write 300 pages. I'm like, I'm going to write 1 page 300 times. It'll be different things, but you're approaching it and chunking it down, because these are all just mindset tricks in terms of how you approach things. Same as a podcast. People say, how do you have 500 episodes of a podcast? I'm like, well, I didn't. I just did 1 a week, for 500 weeks. And it's completely different in terms of how you approach it. And life can be similar, whether it's weight loss, whether it's fat loss, whether it's a big entrepreneurial goal you set for yourself. You have to chunk these things down. And fitness and ultras in particular, what ultra marathons taught me more than anything, because bodybuilding gave me a lot of discipline, because you're effectively a professional dieter. The gym and the training is the easy part, but you're effectively a professional dieter, and you have to build a lot of discipline. And
a lot of self-control,
right? A lot of self-control, a lot of discipline, and a lot of I would say probably distraction techniques, things that when your brain is playing tricks on you with food and hunger, that you're just like, you distract yourself to do other things. Ultra marathons taught me that sometimes taking a break and taking a rest is actually the figurative step forward, but you don't see it that way at the time. And I remember one of my friends told me, he was in ultra marathons, that he was doing I think it was a 50-mile race in the heat. And he explained that, like, I literally had to pull in under a rock for 10 minutes just to get some shade. And he's like, but that allowed me to finish. He goes, if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have finished the 50 miles in the heat. I'd have been too hot.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, going, wow, okay, so actually taking a rest, you learn to rest and not to quit, is a huge thing from ultramarathons. Also, I had James Lawrence on my podcast. He did 50 Ironmans in 50 states in 50 days. And he speaks about don't get too high on the highs and don't get too low on the lows. That's life as well. We're all going to have highs. We're all going to have lows. We'll have difficult times. We'll have amazing times. And you don't want to get too high on the high and too low on the lows.
Yeah, you don't want to lose your composure, whether you're up or down.
No, you don't. And you don't want to lose who you are. You gave me a beautiful quote before we went on about humility. And something I try and hold is the humility and the gratitude for how lucky and fortunate I am in terms of the life that I get to live. And everyone around me is healthy and well. And I love what I do. And I would do everything I do now and I would do it for free. And that is a very fortunate position to be in. So that's what I got from that world. In terms of the race prep, the Arctic was probably the hardest. The Sahara and the 100-miler were a bit more controlling for salt and sodium. So that was just very much a case of however, I know myself at this point, because I sweat a lot under heat conditions, Irish blood. So you put me into, 100-degree plus, my body's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
But so I take salt tablets on board for that. The Arctic was harder because the Arctic, you have to be in a very weird Goldilocks zone because it dropped to below minus. It was minus 38.
You like want to be warm, but you don't want to be burning too much energy, right?
100%, and or going too quickly that you sweat because your risk of hypothermia goes up. So in the Arctic, your two kind of critical factors are your frostbite and your hypothermia. And your frostbite can increase if you're going too slow because it's so cold. And your risk of hypothermia can go up if you're going too hot and you start to sweat. So you're in this Goldilocks zone. So for 230 kilometers over 5 days, you're in this Goldilocks zone where you're trying not to go too fast, trying not to go too slow, and keep your core temperature just burning over like a perfect fire, which I found challenging but enjoyable. Well, enjoyable is a poor choice of words.
The challenge was enjoyable.
The challenge and having done it was great. Same as, I don't like writing books, but I love having written. I don't love running. I like having ran. So interesting. You learn something different from each one. I wouldn't change any of them. I've had, terrible failures as well. I've had ultras that I didn't finish. And I tried to run up the Tian Shan mountain in Kyrgyzstan in August last year into China. And I got a parasite and had to be sent to a Kyrgyzstani hospital where they didn't speak any English. And it was a mad experience. So
scary.
That was scary. I was never so grateful to be back on Irish soil. So a couple of wild rides over the last few years, particularly since I went into the world of endurance and ultra.
So besides the fear of getting a parasite, when that little voice in your head comes in of maybe doubt or fear of the race or training, whatever you're faced with, do you have techniques that you find yourself reverting back to help kind of get out of that, we'll say, kind of paralysis mindset and get yourself back into motion and action?
Yeah, I love that, Matt. One of the most popular things that got quoted back to me in my second book, Rewire Your Mindset, was I put in a quote, literally a self-quote that I thought nobody else would ever see before I had to fly out to the Sahara in Morocco. And because I wasn't a runner, I hadn't any running background, and I was freaking out a couple of days before we had to fly out. Like, I would have, if you would give me any legitimate excuse to get out of it, I'd have taken it. And I wrote this note to myself about how afraid I was, how fearful I was, never thinking I would share it anywhere. It was just purely for me to use as a reference point going forward for the next time I felt afraid of something. But I ended up putting it into the book and then putting some fear tactics around it. I like breaking fear. Firstly, you have to separate fear into its truest form. Is it real fear or perceived fear? They're two different things. Real fear is genuinely something bad could happen.
A parasite might actually damage my system.
A snake could actually bite me in the Sahara. They're all like legitimate fears.
Right.
Perceived fears are, one going up to a guy or a girl that you're attracted to and be afraid you'll be shut down.
They're going to deny me, right?
Exactly. So there's perceived fear and real fear, and it's important to distinguish on the front end which is which. After you've done that, I like to use fear as an acronym for false evidence appearing real, because a lot of the cases it's just your brain that's making up how fearful the situation could be, and you end up catastrophizing against it. And that happens. And something that was a misconception on my part is that fear never goes away. You just get better at managing it. And this is a misconception I had on the front end. I assumed that once you did a certain level of things and had enough evidence to support the thing you were doing, the fear would go away. In my experience, that's not the case. The fear never goes away. You just learn to feel the fear and do it anyways. Right. And you get better at managing it. And that's the only difference now. So when I'm feeling the fear before an ultra, before a race, before stepping on stage, before doing a talk, before going on TV, before doing anything, it's normally just sitting and taking a breath. Like I've got to the point now where I can just take, Navy SEAL breathing, 4 seconds in, 4 second hold, 4 second out, repeat it 10 times. And I can calm my central nervous system enough that I'm able to actually go out on stage or do whatever I need to do. In the early days, I needed something more than that. I needed to be working out. I needed to journal. I needed to think about what I was actually afraid of. It was a bit more of a lengthy process. I talk about it in Rewire Your Mindset in terms of like finding what works for you, because there is no one size fits all when it comes to fear management. Right. But that's what I do now, and something that helps a lot. And I think if I'd known a decade ago that you never lose the fear, you just get better at managing it. Yeah. It would have taken a lot of that self-imposed pressure off, because I was waiting for this day when I just wouldn't feel afraid anymore. And that day, well, maybe it does come, but in my 36 years of life, it hasn't came so far.
Yeah. I think it's a goal for everybody to shoot for, to be able to just take a breath and center oneself, and I think the added, the ability to focus on your breathing is like this added synchronization to your body and your mind that takes you out of the past or the future, whatever you were worrying about or thinking about, and just like anchors you back to the present. And when you can do that, I think it's just so powerful. To your point, like overcoming that observed fear, or the what was the term you used?
Perceived fear.
Perceived fear. It made me think of the quote by Mark Twain. He just says, oh, how my life is full of such, atrocities or tragedy, most of which never happened. Yeah. And it's just so true. Like, how much of the angst do we put on ourselves, that we create on ourselves, without actually knowing the full story? Like, we think that we're these, we think we look into like a crystal ball when we think, and we just have all the answers, and we trust everything that our mind tells us. And you got to be good at being able to do what Brian's just talking about here, which is not only label and identify the nuances of, okay, this is fear, but is this like a real fear, or is this a perceived fear? But then also be able to navigate and transform that into, okay, I need to perform today. I need to be at my best, and I need to be able to run this race. So I love that. I want to talk about your nutrition coaching and what your process is like. Is there a case study you maybe want to bring about, or a few examples you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, nutrition is really interesting. I certified as a nutritionist years ago, sports nutritionist in 2012. And
well, real quick, just to your point, like, you're being in the bodybuilding world that already gives you the hours of experience of nutrition. I mean,
looking for personalized workout plans? Whether you prefer to train at home or hit the gym, try a 14-day free trial of the Think Fitness Life mobile app. Get customized workouts, nutrition guidance, and coaching from a qualified professional who will be in your corner every step of the way. Visit www.thinkfitnesslife.com to start your free trial today. That's www.thinkfitnesslife.com.
You do, it is like 80, I would even argue like 90% nutrition. The workouts are the easiest part, but it all comes down to what you're putting in your body, how you're fueling, when you're doing it, the quality, the amounts, and you get to kind of break the spectrum on that end of understanding the specificity around nutrition.
Yeah, I'm in a very fortunate position, and I think I'm in maybe a slightly unique position that I had the personal first-hand experience through bodybuilding, which is extreme nutrition, and having to learn about that. Also with the certifications that come alongside it. Also working with individuals for that more than a decade now, nearly 12 years working with people with nutrition, but also having gone into endurance, I had to look at nutrition from a completely different perspective.
Totally different lens, yeah.
Under different lens. I do a lot more fat adaptation and metabolic flexibility and ketogenic diet style work when I'm training for an ultra, particularly a multi-day in a place where I won't get food in case I run out of food. I need to be fat adapted and quite metabolically flexible. So I probably have a bit more of a wider lens than most from first-hand experiences. Right. There's obviously people out there better to speak on nutrition than me, but from first-hand experience in the years of working with people with body composition and performance, I have probably a unique lens on it. And nutrition is one of those, it's so context dependent on the individual. And the problem with nutrition, and you can probably speak to your version of this, Matt, the more you know, the less you know. Meaning that
yeah.
it really is one of those.
Yeah,
and
the more you absorb, the more you start to think, I know nothing about this space.
And that's a beautiful position to be in, because
Right.
the people you have to watch out for online are the people who say things in such a black or white way.
Definitive manner.
Definitive manner, because nutrition isn't definitive. It
Yeah.
isn't. There's best practices. Yes, well, most of us do better if we eat more whole foods with more micronutrients than processed foods and sugars. Yeah, 100%. The human body is designed to do better with that in comparison, all other things equal. But outside of that, everything else is so different. Some people do better off high-fat diets. Other people do better with carb cycling. Other people do better with ketogenic diets. Other people do better focusing on whole foods. Other people do better tracking their calories. Other people do better just focusing on a Paleolithic style or a vegan style, plant-based diet. There's so much nuance in there. And the last book I wrote, The Keen Edge, which is Mastering the Mindset for Real Lasting Fat Loss, was all about the nutrition side of things. It was to show that, look, nutrition really is a square peg into a square hole. You need to figure out, if you're a square peg, which hole do you fit into? What nutritional strategy should you apply? And I think that it's so tricky to offer nutritional advice as a one size fits all outside of eat more whole foods and eat less processed foods. With the exception of that, everything else is, okay, well, what's the context of the individual? What's their history? What's their dietary history? What's their genetic history? And then making it fit to them. And I think there's a little bit of take the best practice, hit your daily protein requirements, get your micronutrients in as much as possible with your fruits and vegetables, etc., assuming that's the plan you're following, and then kind of course correcting as you go based on your goal. If it's to lose weight, function, I know you've done podcasts on autophagy for longevity. So again, it's goal dependent. Are you talking health? Are you talking fitness? They're two different things. So you need to establish what the goal is and then reverse engineer the nutritional plan based on the goal.
And it's almost like a ready, fire, aim process where we have to have a general scaffolding to go with, but then really a lot of the magic happens along the journey. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. I think that is a beautiful way to approach it, that ready, fire, aim, that not everyone, poor choice of words, a lot of people who struggle with nutrition think they need to have all their ducks lined up in a row before they start.
Before they even start,
Well, that's not what you do. It's actually, you just start moving and course correct. That's how you get a nutritional plan that works for you.
Yeah, it's like the old Chinese proverb, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is now.
Yeah, completely. And that is nutrition in a nutshell.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Let's talk about, maybe you have some misconceptions that you can think of when you think about people who identify as needing some mindset coaching.
Mindset coaching is such a peculiar topic, because when I wrote Rewire Your Mindset, I inadvertently got labeled as a life coach by other people. And that wasn't my intention with the book. It's not the area.
You got the audio kind of cut out for a second. You got labeled as a
life coach, like somebody that literally does life coach and mindset coaching. And that was never my intention or my goal, was to get labeled as a life coach.
Do you feel like that kind of retracts from authority, because you said you were trying to avoid being fitness influencer originally, and do you think that life coach kind of like retracts from that authority? Because it's such a general term. It's
the thing is with life coaching, it's become a bit more prominent in recent years. And I wrote Rewire Your Mindset and released that in 2018. So it was 4 years ago now, 5-6 years ago. Oh, COVID years, 6 years ago now.
So COVID years are long.
I know, yeah. It makes me always remember. I'm like, 4 years ago. It's like, no, there's 2 years of COVID you're not including there, Brian. But at the time, I didn't see life coaching as a legitimate thing. And although I think some people definitely would benefit from having a life coach, I think coaches need coaches, business coaches, life coaches, fitness coaches. I think it's a really valuable thing to have. Like, I'm learning Spanish. I have a Spanish coach and a Spanish teacher. Like, you need coaches at different areas of your life based on your priority and what you're looking to do.
To help you get to that next level.
Exactly. It helps you level up massively. And it's a great thing to have. But with mindset and getting into that bracket, one of the paradoxes, or potentially even a dichotomy, is that you have everything you need, you just haven't accessed it yet. And that's when it comes to mindset. Like, it's different with fitness. You need some educational tools. You need to know how to control for calories and what a calorie deficit is to lose weight. You need to understand basic resistance and strength training to get stronger. You need some education. With mindset, you have access to everything. You're actually just unlearning most of the stuff that's holding you back, whether that's been self-imposed, whether that's been belief systems given to you by a parent or authority figures throughout your life, or it's just learned experience by being knocked back so many times and not having learned from the experience and taking the lesson and failing forward. You actually have access to everything that you need. And that can sound kind of paradoxical because, like, I write books around mindset. I talk around mindset. When in reality, you don't really need to educate yourself. You just need somebody to click and say, look, you have everything you need. You actually just need to unlearn the things that are holding you back. And once you're able to do that, you kind of get out of your own way. Hence your biggest enemy living between your two ears. And I think that's probably the biggest confusion point, but also misconception people have, where they end up, particularly with a life coach, giving the authority over to the coach and thinking that I have a coach now, they're going to fix
They're going to do it for me.
They're going to do it for me. No, that doesn't happen in any area. Right. And like, it won't happen in fitness, but we know in fitness that our personal trainer is not going to lift the weight for us. They're not going to eat the broccoli or the salad.
We'll see what the future holds. Awesome.
Maybe the future. As of 2024, they can't do that. But when it comes to mindset and life coaching, sometimes people think that, I have the coach now, it's going to fix my life. It's like, well, actually, they might guide you. If you think about them as a guide on the side and that you're the hero of your journey, you have to take the action steps.
Right.
You'll do a lot better with it.
And sometimes that, sometimes that is taking the pressure off. And to your point, that can just take the responsibility off them so they can kind of sit back, relax, and someone else will handle it. But sometimes it's also kind of the little bit of pressure taken off they needed to make that first step, and then, just to kind of paraphrase your process here, it's like, we don't necessarily need to dive into the specific misconceptions, but just in general, when people get these misconceptions in their mindset that are holding them back, you help them essentially like identify the sticking point, dissect into it, where it's coming from, what it's about, what it's doing for you or not for you, and then help them kind of get realigned to get back on their path and keep going again. Does that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, that's beautifully said, Matt. I couldn't have put that better. That realignment. A lot of the times as a coach, when I'm working with people in fitness programs, I'm just bringing them back into alignment in most cases. They have bad habits picked up along the way, misinformation picked up along the way, misexperience picked up along the way, and I'm just bringing them back into alignment.
It makes me think of a quote that's like, 80% of medicine is distracting the patient while the body heals itself, or something like that. So,
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, like, sometimes as coaches, I feel like I'm just kind of keeping someone excited about coming to the gym and working out and distracting them to get to their health goals,
Yeah.
So Brian, where can people go to find your books? Where can they go to learn more about you and coaching, your nutrition coaching, or potentially working with you?
Oh, amazing. Thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, BrianKeaneFitness.com. Everything's on there, from programs and courses, and then the Brian Keane podcast. And I'm Brian Keane Fitness on all the social media channels. Instagram's the one that I'm on the most. It's where you can get me on Instagram DM. That's literally the only thing I'm on. Email goes to my assistant. Messenger goes to my assistant. But I'm on Instagram DM. It's the one thing that I prioritize myself. So,
all right, you hear that, everybody? Flood his IG inbox.
1,000 DMs tomorrow.
And by the way, that's Brian Keane, Keane. But I'll be sure to include those links in our show notes. Last couple questions here, Brian, is what is your favorite lift?
Oh, it's like I've only one child, but I feel like it's like asking what's my favorite child if I had like 8.
You like feel like you're just being disloyal to your other lifts by picking the one.
I do. I love a front squat.
All right. Love it. Yeah. Functional, hits everything, right? Get a lot of core, applicable to Olympic lifting if you like that road too. Yeah, it's a great lift. And not everybody can do it, so it kind of sets you apart, a little bit. Like, if you can front squat, okay, this guy knows what he's doing.
Well, I like to think so. Again, that's subjective from each individual person, but yeah, that's the one I pick for sure.
What about do you have a favorite quote, or maybe a quote that comes to mind after today's show?
I do. It's funny because you've made a few quotes as well, and I'm a big man for a quote, Matt. I love quotes. I live by the Carl Jungian quote that for your branches to reach up to heaven, your roots need to go down to hell, which is such a demonic quote. But
I love it though. I love it though. You got to be able to kind of like walk amongst the evil to help other people steer away from it.
100%. And I live my life by that, because everything that you've gone through, all your difficulties, what you potentially think is a weakness is actually your strength. And I think that represents itself perfectly in that Carl Jung quote.
So I just want to hear it one more time. In order for your branches to reach to heaven, your roots have to reach to hell. Yeah. You know, it also reminds me of, because I'm a big quote person too, and that's actually like where my writings have gone, is I just like listed all these quotes I love, and I tried to start like categorizing them, and I got all disorganized. But it reminds me of another quote, which is, oh man, I just had a brain fart. In order for your branches to reach to heaven, your roots have to reach to hell. Oh, it's by Marcus Aurelius, and he goes, you know, you can't be capable of greatness unless you're capable of great violence. Otherwise, you're just harmless. You have to be, or no, you're not capable of peace unless you're capable of great violence. Otherwise, you're just harmless. And I think it's so powerful, because you do have to have like a strength to you, but you have to be the warrior in the garden. You can't just be out there attacking everything.
I love that. I read Marcus Aurelius's Meditations once a year at least.
Really? Yeah, it's so good.
On my mantelpiece.
You can probably get like something different out of it every year, right?
Every time, different. The same man steps into a different river every time. Different man steps into.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Never step in the same river twice.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, it was an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. It's too bad, you know, we're not in Ireland together. We can go for a pint now after the episode, but that'll have to happen in the future. If you're ever in Utah, please hit us up. And everybody, Brian Keane, everybody, like I said, I'll link everything in the show notes. And check out his book, The Fitness Mindset and Rewire Your Mindset.
Matt, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much again for having me on.